Hello, Crypto Wisers. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Milton, and I will be your captain for this episode. Today is episode 3 of CryptoWise Chats. These are the videos where we have in-depth, long-form interviews with some of the greatest minds in crypto. And I couldn't be more excited for today's episode because today we have Makoto Takemiya, who is the CEO of Soramitsu. And Soramitsu is the company behind the decentralized network Sora, and they created Polkaswap, which is one of CryptoWise's favorite dexes, and Sora in future will be a Polkadot parachain. And they also created what I believe is the best Polkadot and Kusama wallet on the market right now. That is the Fearless wallet. So much to talk to Makoto about. It was a really fascinating conversation. Now, I tried to go in depth with him, which means this is not a beginner video for Sora or Polkaswap. But if you don't know anything about the Sora Network or Polkaswap, not to fear, because I have made past videos on both of them. I made this video on Polkaswap when it launched 2 months ago, and way back when one of my very first videos was on Sora, and that was this video here. I really do believe that the Sora Network and Polkaswap are going to be a huge part of the Polkadot ecosystem, so they are definitely a project that you need to know about if you don't already. And before we launch into this amazing interview with Makoto, would you do me a favor? Please smash the like on this video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit that notification bell. All right, without further ado, buckle up, because here is our interview with Makoto Takemiya, the CEO of Soramitsu. All right, well, we're here with another episode of CryptoWise Chats, and today I'm super excited. We have the CEO of Soramitsu, also one of the creators of the Sora Network and Polkaswap, that is Makoto Takemiya. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show, Makoto.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So much to talk about here with Soramitsu and Sora and Polkaswap. I do want to touch on first maybe the Kusama parachains, because that's kind of been big news the last few weeks. We've seen the first parachains on Kusama, and I'm just curious to hear from your perspective why Sora did not get involved yet in the Kusama parachains. If you do plan on getting a Kusama parachain, or if you're just waiting and you're just going to go straight for a Polkadot parachain when those arrive.
Yeah, so the parachains are something that is very interesting. We've been working with Polkadot in the ecosystem since 2018 when we first started on our grant for Kagome with Web3 Foundation, and of course we always had from the very beginning an intention to get a parachain. The problem is the current way that most chains do crowd loan is that you basically mint tokens and you give it to people to lend you some, Kusama or DOT in the case of a DOT parachain. And it's not really convincing tokenomics. It's pretty bad, actually, from a long-term economic standpoint. And that's why we decided to take a different strategy where instead of basically minting tokens and giving them to people to borrow like some KSM for a few months, what we're going to do is build a bridge first, and then using the bridge, you'll be able to move Kusama and then future DOT from the relay chain onto our chain, and then you'll be able to put this into our token bonding curve, which is a smart contract in the Sora network that kind of holds the tokens in reserve, and it mints new tokens in exchange for that. So it not only provides a store of KSM and DOT, but also provides a way to get, to provide some backing or stabilizing mechanism for the XOR token. So that's kind of our strategy instead. And additionally, we also want to have our own network validators on our Sora network, in addition to having finality for some transactions from the relay chain. We're not the only chain doing this. Moonbeam is doing the same type of thing. So we're studying closely their approach and trying to figure out technically what's the fastest way to implement this. But that's, really the plan is we want to do this and open up a bridge within a few months so that people can start to move KSM and in the future other tokens onto the Sora network and that's kind of part of our initial strategy. So it's very different than other chains are doing, but we're trying to take a longer term look. So rather than just looking at what do we do this year to pump token price or something, we're actually trying to think, how do we create real value that will be around 10, 20, 30 years into the future?
A lot of questions come up from that for me. Unlike most Polkadot projects, you actually launched Polkaswap before securing the Parachain. And the Sora Network has been going, and recently you announced that it surpassed 1 million blocks and 1 million transactions on the Sora Network. So I'm curious how the network has done so well on its own, how you achieve that, and then if it is doing so well on its own, what are the main advantages, and why is the long-term strategy to become a parachain and be part of the Polkadot ecosystem?
Well, setting up our own network was really just a way to kind of bootstrap what we were doing. And, launching and being able to have a live product is very different from doing things on the test network or doing things theoretically. And I think the ecosystem has really benefited a lot from this because we've learned a lot. We were able to improve a lot of things. Just as an example, swaps are very expensive transactions to calculate. And at the beginning, it was quite a slow processing time to process each swap. And we were able to make the speed compared to launch about 10x faster now compared to 3 months ago. And so things like this you only really see when you're doing things under production load. And I think that's been quite invaluable experience. Now, we don't plan to be an independent network forever. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to, especially because of the way our economic system is founded, where we want to create a source of liquidity and capital allocation for many different projects. It makes sense to be able to be tied into a greater ecosystem. That's what I think tying in with Kusama and Polkadot makes a lot of sense. Currently, we do have a bridge to Ethereum, but we never really considered ourselves part of the Ethereum ecosystem. We're really, I would say, very strongly connected to Polkadot and Kusama Vision, and it's always been something that we really clearly see ourselves as part of the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem, and not part of Ethereum or BSC or other types of ecosystems where even if we bridges to them, it's really not about long-term collaboration as it is about just providing more options for people to move assets around. Being part of Kusama and Polkadot is actually more about also contributing to that ecosystem and being able to give back to the community and to help things like Substrate become much better and faster and easier to use.
And can you talk a little bit about when you made that decision to become part of Polkadot? I know that Soramitsu, I believe you've been working on from 2013, or you've been in the blockchain space since 2013. So at what point did you hear about Polkadot? Did you decide that that was going to be the network that you wanted to have Sora be part of?
Yeah, so just to tell a little bit about my story, I've been in the blockchain space since 2013, like basically January 2013, and I was involved in many different projects, open source projects, even as a contributor, as a developer, and I think that gives me kind of a unique perspective. As far as Polkadot goes, I remember seeing the original paper in 2016, and then in 2017, I had the pleasure of meeting Gavin in New York, and then I later met him in Ibiza at the Polkadot event in July of 2017, and then we were able to get a grant from Web3 that we started at the end of 2018 to work on the C++ version of Polkadot host. So we've been part of the ecosystem for a while, and I always thought it was really a very compelling vision, because it's not just about technology, it also provides different social structures that I think are needed to make blockchain ecosystems a success. Let's be honest, Ethereum's really held back a lot by the politics of miners, and proof of work as a consensus algorithm really has a lot of baggage that is hard to overcome. They're trying, of course, and they're making some slow progress this month as well. But there's a long way to go. And if you really want to change technology fast and to be competitive, you can't do it in the context of a huge monolithic ecosystem or monolithic chain. And so instead, having many different chains with their own governance and their own ability to make decisions and upgrade the network makes a lot of sense. And we've even seen that already in Sora. We've done several network upgrades through on-chain governance, and it's enabled us to make things faster, to improve things. Where if we were using something like proof of work or even proof of stake, it would be much harder to get everyone, to coordinate and update their nodes and to do things. So it's much easier to do this via on-chain governance. And so I think that's one of the biggest advantages. There's other advantages too. I think that Substrate is a better, also superior framework to Ethereum. The way data processing is done is much faster. WASM is the future. I think many people see that. And to me, it just makes a lot of sense to be in that ecosystem. It's much more compelling than other cross-chain solutions like Cosmos. For a variety of reasons, I think Polkadot is much more mature in its design and its kind of robustness, partly because of Gavin's previous experience working on Ethereum. I think he learned a lot about how crypto communities actually work in practice, and this was able to be taken and put into this fairly robust design. It's not perfect. No framework is, but it's able to self-evolve and improve over time, and that's what's really important.
On that subject, I'm a little bit surprised actually that the Zor token, the XOR token, launched first on Ethereum, and I just wanted to get maybe a sense of how that happened and what the strategy was, because I know with a lot of the Polkadot projects, we have some that have waited for Kusama and Polkadot to be able to be a pair chain before launching any token. And then we do have a bunch that launched first on Ethereum. Sora, for me, is kind of the project that's most surprising that it had an Ethereum token to begin with, just because of hearing you speak about really being part of Polkadot and not identifying yourself as kind of being part of Ethereum. So how did that strategy come about in terms of launching XOR on Ethereum first and then bridging over recently?
Well, launching and having users has a quality all its own, and I think it's important to to put things out there in a fast way and to get people to start to use it. That being said, it's been a long journey. So we started on the Sora journey, contributing to it back in 2017, and then we first launched XOR not on Ethereum but on another network that was using Iroha, Hyperledger Iroha, which is a blockchain platform we also contribute to. And that was back in 2019, I guess, was when we launched. Yeah, and then we built a bridge to Ethereum, and then tokens moved to Ethereum. Then there's a community referendum to change the tokenomics, where the old Iroha tokens became Val tokens, and then the Ethereum tokens became Zor. So it's kind of gone through several iterative cycles over the last few years. But the technology is just a way to accomplish your goals. It's not the goal itself. So the goal itself is to create a decentralized world economic system. So we don't really care about the technology that much. I'm a technologist. I'm a computer scientist by training. I like technology. Obviously, it's very fascinating. It's cool stuff. But it changes a lot, and you have to be able to stay flexible. You have to be able to, to see what the trends are and move as quickly as possible to kind of deal with the trends. We're certainly not the only Polkadot ecosystem project that has a token on Ethereum before launch. There's other teams have done it too. Some tokens and systems even launched like years ago. I remember using the ChainX DEX, the first DEX in the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem back in 2019 when they launched their chain. So there's quite a lot of variety in the ecosystem, and I think if we had sat around saying, we're just going to wait, for the ecosystem to be mature, not going to do anything, I think we would have really done a disservice to ourselves and our vision, because really we wanted to start to put things out there and evolve it. And I think the project has benefited a lot because it's far more decentralized now than it would have been if we'd waited, another year or two to launch, because we were able to already do many on-chain referendums before even coming to Substrate, which changed our tokenomics and did many things. For example, the VAL token was created on Ethereum, deployed to Ethereum by doing voting, and then the cryptographic proof of the voting, the Merkle root, I think, of the votes was put into the Ethereum contract to enable it. So there's quite a lot of really cool technology that we've done and learned about, and I think the ecosystem has benefited a lot from actually launching rather than sitting around and waiting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's not a judgment. I think it's been amazing, actually, what you've been able to accomplish with before Polkadot even launching. It's been interesting to talk to various Polkadot projects about their different strategies behind it. I do want to talk to you about the new economic order that Sora talks about. But first, I want to talk about Polkaswap a little bit more directly. So Sora does describe itself as a new economic order network. But I'm curious, do you consider Polkaswap being able to be viewed through the lens of something that is a standalone DEX that in itself can compete with or is competing with, say, something like Uniswap or PancakeSwap or some of the other DEXs that we see on the other networks?
Well, I think it would be naive to kind of not see the bigger picture, but Uniswap is a dApp on top of the Sora network. It's one of possible mini dApps. Anyone else could create a DEX too if they wanted to on our network. And there's lots of advantages to having it on Substrate versus Ethereum and Solidity. Block times are faster. You can do much more complex logic. Like the tokenomics we have in Polkaswap are really, really complex. So the buyback and burn logic, for some types of tokens, like VAL, for instance, the VAL buyback and burn happens at every transaction. And it would be quite hard to do this on Ethereum in Solidity, because you'd have to take the transaction fee, swap it into another token, and burn it. It's really expensive operation. But we were able to do this in a pretty programmatically efficient way in Substrate. That being said, so Polkaswap I think is an awesome DEX. It's way more complex than Uniswap or anything. It's probably like 100 times more complex. But it's kind of part of a larger picture. So it's not just, it was never really considered to be, just by itself. I mean, Polkaswap is a set of APIs, and these APIs represent kind of a financial markets infrastructure for the Sora ecosystem. And hopefully people will develop new features and add new types of infrastructure as well, like things like order books, for instance, or derivatives, or synthetic assets. Things like that, I think, are all really exciting things that could be added. But yeah, it takes a lot of time to build up all that. So for now, it's really, really simple. That's why I think a lot of people compare the usability to Uniswap or PancakeSwap or whatever, because it is kind of, from the user perspective, it's really just swapping assets. But behind the scenes, so much more is going on. You're actually integrating the token bonding curve, which is the decentralized XOR token management contract that's built into the swapping process as well. And there's some math there that if you hit the intersection point between the XYK curve and the token bonding curve, then it'll automatically allocate the the part of the swap that you're doing to both liquidity sources. I think that's really quite amazing. And there's the opportunity to integrate more liquidity sources in the future, though it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of community effort, and many brilliant teams to kind of realize that. But that's part of the clear vision as well. So Polkaswap really is about, well, let's get into the name. So the name, of course, is playing on the Polkadot meme, and it makes a lot of sense, I think. So Polkadot really, going back 1 or 2 years, most people thought about Polkadot, not really so much about Kusama, though now people are saying Kusama is the real Polkadot, which is kind of cool. I think I like Kusama a lot. But the whole idea is, you have many different chains kind of connected together. It's like, like a Polkadot, I don't know, mesh or something. I don't know. So that's kind of the idea. So Polkaswap is really a way, take assets from many different chains, and you're able to swap them and kind of get like a decentralized liquidity sourcing using the Polkadot, parachain methodology, and cross-chain message passing and Spree and different cool technologies that we're working to integrate. So that's kind of the vision, is to create like this decentralized asset swapping infrastructure that anyone can use, but that also integrates to the very core our tokenomics and kind of the philosophy of Zora, which is kind of creating like a decentralized monetary system. So a way to create and allocate tokens and manage the token supply autonomously without any human involvement. That's kind of our vision to create this world economic system.
I know that some projects like Akala and some of the others are both going to have a parachain on Kusama and Polkadot. Is Sora going to do the same, or can you just have a parachain on Polkadot and create a bridge? As you said, you're building a bridge already to Kusama. Is that enough? What would be the advantage of it being on both, having a parachain on both?
Okay, that's a good question. So there's still a lot of unknowns because there's very few production applications that you can kind of point to and study empirically. So generally, the theoretical advantage would be if you have a parachain connecting both, you can have a faster asset movement time because you wouldn't have to move from, say, Polkadot to Kusama than to your network. Right? You wouldn't have to do 2 hops, you could just do a single hop. Technically, the way the default consensus works is that you would just give transaction finality to the relay chain, and you can't really have 2 different relay chains. You would just have, Polkadot, or just have Kusama. And that's why Akala and others are creating 2 different networks. Well, there's probably many reasons that they're doing it, but one of them is kind of the way the default consensus works. We're actually trying to explore how do we have our own set of validators, and at the same time, for certain types of transactions, we would have transaction finality for these transactions from the Kusama relay chain and the Polkadot relay chain. So we actually want to have only one network, but actually connect to 2 different relay chains.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
This is still something we're researching, right? So we, may not be practical, or it may, take several years. We don't know everything yet. That being said, there's other options too, and it seems like, if you do have a parachain on Kusama, you already can take advantage of most of what the ecosystem has to offer. So any advantages you would get from being connected to Polkadot would be kind of incremental. In fact, because Kusama evolves faster than Polkadot, it probably is better or preferred to be part of the, directly connected to Kusama than it is to the Polkadot parachain, because Polkadot isn't always going to support the newest features first. It's more conservative, slower moving, higher value, and you have to be more careful. But Kusama, is the opposite. It's faster moving, it's more experimental, and as a consequence of that, every new feature will be on Kusama first, in all likelihood, right?
Do you think that might be? You said at the beginning that Kusama wasn't really considered to, from the original vision, it wasn't to be considered kind of in what it's turned into. Do you think that might in the end hurt Polkadot, in that if people kind of think that way, that I might as well just be on Kusama, it's going to have all the newer features, that there'll be a lot of projects that we thought might have a parachain on Polkadot who just decide to just be on Kusama and stay there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we don't know yet because it's, we don't have the market yet. parachains on Polkadot will most likely cost more money than Kusama, so it might be more of like a luxury item or status symbol. It could be the opposite. If there's low demand, parachains could be cheaper on Polkadot than in Kusama, which would be actually good. So I think the market will find, because it's an auction-based mechanism, right, for the parachains, the market will find the right Schelling point. It will find the right the correct way to allocate between the two different networks without without any kind of people being too worried, I think, about it. That being said, if you're trying to do new and innovative things, I think Kusama is probably a better choice to get a parachain slot on. But for higher value applications where you want maybe more security, Polkadot is supposed to, in theory, be much more high value, and the market cap is much higher, right? Too. So and you have much more money staked with the validators than on Kusama. So yeah, these different factors, I think. So if you want to create like a really high value application, Polkadot might be a better choice than Kusama. For us, we are kind of trying to explore how would we do both, and could you split like the types of transactions that each would process, and how would you guarantee digital scarcity, different things like that. So it's not a trivial thing to design, and we'll probably do it in stages. So the first stage will be, I think it makes sense to get Kusama parachain as soon as possible, and so what that means is first we need a bridge as soon as possible and get some Kusama, some KSM in our token bonding curve reserves, and then we would join the auctions and win a parachain slot, and then set that up as soon as possible. I don't want to speculate on the time. We are a decentralized project, so in theory it doesn't have to be. I say we kind of not like me personally, but the ecosystem, the Sora ecosystem as a whole.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I'm hoping that more teams will step forward and offer to do development work in exchange for Zora tokens and maybe some Val tokens, PSwap tokens. So we recently, as part of that goal, we announced RFP process where anyone can propose a new request for proposals. So if you have a new feature idea, you can write an RFP, put it out there, and then different teams can make a proposal that I'm going to develop this, let's say, for $1 million in 6 months, and all this stuff. And then we'll have on-chain voting to vote between the different proposals, and the winning proposal would actually be committing to develop the software, and then before the software can be deployed, you actually have to vote to do a runtime upgrade, and then as part of the runtime upgrade process, the team would get paid, the allocated tokens, and this could come from Sora Parliament Treasury, or it could just be newly minted tokens. There's really no limit because of the flexibility that you get working with Substrate.
Right. Okay. Let's go back to Polkaswap for a second, and I want to ask you a couple of specific questions about Polkaswap. You did do the soft launch in April, so it's been out there in the world for a few months, and I'm just curious how those first few months of existence have compared to what your expectations were for what you thought would happen in the first few months.
Well, I would say it exceeded my personal expectations. I can't speak for the expectations of the community. I think the timing was pretty good. We released at a good timing in the overall market cycle. Of course, a month after launch is when there's a market downturn, which always hurts. But the cool thing about a DEX is people are trading when the market's going up or going down. They're kind of doing both. They're always trading, right? So we've had more than 1 million transactions, which is nice. We've had more than 10 million PSwap that were bought back from the market and burned using the buyback and burn mechanism. There's more than 100,000 DAO that were bought back and burned from the transaction fees. and then there's around I think 15,500 Zor, which were burned, not bought back, just burned in the process. So I think these are pretty good numbers, and I kind of like that we're moving at a a steady rate rather than just shooting up and then coming back down. There's certain advantages of slow and steady growth, because you can build a community at a good pace. You can build up the right infrastructure and decision-making processes. Because you can always move faster if you just control everything yourself and just do it. But that's never really been the vision. The vision of Polkaswap, the vision of Sora, has always been to be decentralized and unstoppable. Even if me and my company Soramitsu went away, somebody else can would likely come forth and carry it on, because then they get token rewards for doing development. So there's lots of processes that have been built up that we've been able to do because we launched, I think, at a good time, and we're able to kind of quickly build up a community. And our chat is, I don't even know how many people, around 20,000, almost 20,000 people, maybe 18,000 or something, which is pretty good.
And are you seeing growth? Like, are you seeing that kind of slow, steady growth? Is that what you're seeing in the numbers?
Yeah, I see pretty consistent numbers. The actual transaction volume being done on Polkaswap is very heavily correlated to the market cycle. So when the market is going up, there's a lot of trading activity, or if it's crashing, there's a lot of trading activity. But things have been pretty slow last couple of weeks, I would say, because the whole market has been kind of stagnant.
Right.
That's just part of it. I don't really look at token prices too much, just because it's not, to me, a very interesting variable or metric. Rather, I look at some of the community-run statistics that show things like volume, number of transactions, number of tokens being swapped, how many new users you have in the last 24 hours, things like that. These are really important metrics.
I am curious, though, in terms of price. I agree with you. Talking about price, there's not much to say. A market's going to, a price is going to go up and down. But in terms of the XOR token, the ZOR token, I'm curious to talk about this a little bit because of the token bonding curve. And I've heard you talk about how, so in theory, the ZOR price should be somewhat stable. It should kind of trade within the range, I guess, a smaller range than some tokens, because it's tied to the token bonding curve. And yet, since the launch of Polkaswap, and the whole market did crash, and we saw ZOR kind of crash with the market. And I heard you talk about that being because the token bonding curve has not yet fully been collateralized. And so I'm just wondering, was your hope when you launched, was your hope that it would be fully collateralized by now? How does it become fully collateralized? And what is the strategy, I guess, to get there?
Yeah, so you don't actually need full collateralization for it to be effective. We have so today there's around 350,000, it's actually 345,000 ZOR in circulation. Out of this, around 55,000 or so are locked into validators. So these are not having any economic effect, right? Because they're locked up, they're not doing anything. And then there's another like 120,000 or so of ZOR that are locked into liquidity pools. So these have some economic effect, because if you trade into them, it's giving liquidity in the markets, but they're not dumpable tokens, because they're kind of locked up, right? So it's like 170,000, 180,000 ZOR are kind of non-floating from that standpoint, right? So what that means is really, you have like another well, like maybe 170,000, 160,000, 170,000 Zor that are floating. So you need to collateralize this. At least, not everyone's going to dump when this market goes down, so you don't really need full collateralization, but you do need collateralization of maybe 80,000 Zor, which we didn't have when the market went down in May. I was kind of hoping that things would continue to go up for a few more weeks or so that we could continue to build up reserves, because we were actually doing quite well in building up reserves when the market started to turn down in May. So I was watching particularly ETH and DAI reserves in the token bonding curve, and I think at the peak before the crash in May, we had I think around 300 or 400 ETH and around maybe 5 million DAI or something like that. Maybe it's like 4 million DAI. So these reserves were eaten immediately within a day or two when the market was going down and people were selling. When you sell into the reserves, the tokens are burned, so it reduces the supply. That's why we burned from the peak. We burned around 15,000 Zor, which is quite a substantial amount of Zor. But it costs us all the reserves in the token bonding curve, right? So so what that means really is that 4 million DAI and 300 or so ETH were not enough. Maybe I think if we had maybe 3 to 4 times that amount, we could have reached a more stable price of Zor that was within the target volatility band. The volatility band is the price that the token bonding curve sells new Zor for, and the price that it buys back for. There's actually 29% margin, because it's 20% margin normally, and when it's under collateralized, there's an extra 9% that's tacked on. So it's 29% margin between the high and the low. And so Zor was never meant to be a stable coin, but it was meant to be predictable. And if you can get it to float within this volatility band, then you get some predictability, and that can bootstrap the economic system much more easily. It's easier to talk to people and get them to accept Zor if you have some expectations about what it's going to be worth in a month, right?
Right.
So
how do you, is that still the goal, is to get it to that range, that 29% range? And I guess because the prices dropped so much from the launch, is this the new range for Zor, or is there a way that you see it getting, is the ideal range for it where it launched, which I think was around the $600 mark, or does it not matter?
Well, the token bonding curve starts at like 900, it's like 895 right now, and it will buy. So that's what it sells Zor for, but it'll buy Zor about 30% less. So yeah, yeah. Right now it's trading, I think, 150 or so. So it's significantly below the target volatility range. But it'll eventually reach the volatility range because every transaction burns Zor, so the supply is reducing every day.
Right.
It's pretty continuously going down. So just from use, and because there's, it's the native token of the network, so there's some intrinsic value or intrinsic utility of the token. It's being used for staking on the validators. It's also being used in referendums. If you vote on chain, you vote by bonding Zor. To become a council member, you bond Zor. So all these, there's many uses for Zor. Transaction fees, to reduce spam on the network. These are also paid in Zor. So, and also liquidity on Polkaswap. So all liquidity pairs are with respect to Zor. So there's quite a lot of utility that Zor has just intrinsically based on the system design. And additionally, every transaction burns a small amount of Zor. It's a small amount, but it's non-zero. So eventually, you will hit a point where you burn so much of the supply that you'll be going back up to the where the supply is managed by the token bonding curve contract, right, rather than kind of by the secondary markets or the market trends.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when will this happen? I mean, that's anyone's guess. I think it's not too critical of a situation right now, but it is important for long-term expectations. So I don't know if you've seen the news. There's people in El Salvador, for whatever reason, protesting the new Bitcoin law. And one of the comments that they were making, the protesters were making, was that if you get paid like $30 today, Bitcoin could be $5 tomorrow, which is true, right? I think they also could have mentioned that you could pay $30 for transaction fees, but that's another comment. So to really be useful in situations like that, if you want a country to use Zor, you have to have some what's called forward guidance or forward predictability of the token, and that's really what the token bonding curve is supposed to give us. And you don't need full collateralization, like I said. You just need maybe a third of the token supply, maybe 15 to 30% of the token supply should be collateralized for it to be effective in most market conditions, I would say.
I'm curious. So right now, the stable coin of choice on Polkaswap seems to be DAI. And can you explain why you chose DAI out of the stable coins? I'm just curious about that.
So DAI is one of the reserve currencies of the token bonding curve, and this makes it quite popular. So there's a lot of liquidity for DAI on our network. Also, LPs get double the strategic bonus for ETH and DAI.
But I'm just curious, like why specifically? Obviously, having a stable coin seems like a good choice, an obvious choice. But why out of all the stable coins you could have chosen, why did you choose DAI as the one to use?
Well, we wanted to use an algorithmic stable coin. There's other algorithmic coins like TUSD, like Terra, but these are not really too major. There's not so many users yet, and DAI seems to have a pretty obviously large user base. You wouldn't want to use something like USDC or Tether or any of the other ones, Paxos. You wouldn't want to use these directly because there's ways that the contract owner can basically stop your transactions. So the way the bridge works is, they could basically blacklist the bridge, and then suddenly in one instant, all of your value is lost, which would kind of suck, right?
Yeah.
DAI is not perfect either because, if you saw the Sora Economic Forum, Tim Swanson in his talk talked about how I think 60% of the assets of DAI are USDC. So it's these could also go away in the blink of an eye.
Right.
And I think it's a structural problem, but there's not too much you can do about it right now because there's not better alternatives. It was really unfortunate, I think, that MakerDAO added USDC because I do think it's a structural risk to the users and to applications like Zor. But we'll see. Actually, since we're talking about price, a really interesting thing that I noticed is that the price has nothing to do with features on Sora or Polkaswap or users or trading volume or anything. It seems like it's 100% correlated with Polkadot, with DOT tokens. So if DOT goes up 8%, we go up 8%. If it goes down 10%, we go down 10%. It's pretty fun to watch that, but it's quite interesting. It kind of shows that it doesn't matter what we're doing or what the community is doing or the health of the community. It's just basically correlated with other assets, which is in turn correlated with Bitcoin, right? So
that's very interesting, though. I'll have to watch that.
I look at better or more important macroeconomic metrics. So, for example, the burn rate, number of burns, tokens burned, different things like that.
So I don't have you for very much longer, and I do want to touch upon the governance vision for Sora, and it is creating, down the road, creating a parliament for Sora, and I think there's some very interesting things in there. We don't really have a lot of time to go into the explanation of that, but I think we'll link to your talk from your economic forum. You describe it very well. But I was curious. So the idea is that there would be kind of a group of Sora citizens, what you are calling Sora citizens. To become a Sora citizen, you would have to bond 150 XOR tokens. In that vision, I'm curious, how many citizens do you think Sora would need for it to function in the way that you're hoping for it to? How big do you see? Well, I guess what would be the minimum number for it to be viable, and then kind of an ideal number?
Well, the ideal number is 7 billion, but so basically everyone on Earth should become a citizen. I would say minimum number. It's a multi-stage process, and so you need probably need maybe around 300. I would say would be a good starting point. I mean, you would obviously want more, but under that number, kind of a lot of the committees kind of break down, I would say. Because so the governance, the way it works is it's not just like token voting or anything like that. Democracy, so-called, that we think of today is actually an oligarchy. So, American-style democracy was meant to be an oligarchy because the founding fathers didn't trust the regular people, right? So they kind of limited who had the vote, what the voting process was. In Athenian democracy, which is kind of more pure democracy, they used sortitions. They randomly chose decision makers who would make decisions. This avoided problems of collusion, factions being formed that have special interests, or even like a large bureaucracy that just kind of self-propagates, like you have in the EU, for instance, today. So really, because you're randomly choosing people to make decisions, and you're splitting it up into multiple bodies, so there's like a decision pipeline, and different people are doing each of the different steps. It kind of makes it so it's really hard to collude. It's really hard to, the people proposing something are not the same people making a decision. So it's not an oligarchic system like you would have in American democracy, so-called democracy. It's instead a kind of. It
does seem like there would be a lot of responsibility of being a citizen. Like there would be actual tasks or responsibilities and so is the idea that if you were chosen to do a specific task, because I believe it would be randomly chosen, that you would be compensated for the time and effort that you would have to put forth there?
Yeah, I think there is compensation for citizens, whether you're chosen or not. They get a part of they get a part of the newly allocated ZOR from the token bonding curve.
Okay, so it's just there's just kind of it's a reward that they get just for being a citizen, no matter what.
Going beyond that, I think that needs some careful thought. I think so. There is a role for experts in this field, and the role for experts is in what are called interest panels. So if you have a proposal, the proposal has to be studied, and it's studied by a group of volunteers, and the volunteers can be full-time ministries or full-time, staff that are hired by the ecosystem to study different proposals and to write pros and cons of them. But they're not the decision makers. So that's really important. We've learned a lot, by studying existing political systems like American democracy or the EU, or even the Soviet Union and China. And it's really important to kind of understand, how these different things work. And like in the EU, you really have bureaucrats kind of more and more centralizing control, making more and more rules because that gives them more control. And really, that's not the type of system that you want. You want to have a system where, sure, professionals can propose ideas and they can study ideas, but they're not the decision makers. And the decision makers need to be a random sample of the populace so that you avoid collusion and, kind of, you don't want to choose kind of a non-representative sample of a population to make decisions, because then you kind of exclude certain minorities. And Friedrich Hayek talked a lot about this and how democracy, was a tyranny of the majority, and it was the way it was created there. But if you have representative samples that are randomly chosen, you have a much better likelihood that you'll be able to have even minority and extreme views represented, and that's really important. You don't want to have anyone excluded from the process. It doesn't mean that they're the only people making decisions, but at least they should have a voice.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Super ambitious, obviously, creating almost your own world or universe, an economic universe that exists within this kind of greater world that we live in. So yeah, obviously we could talk forever about it. There's so much to talk about. It's definitely very interesting. I do want to touch on, before I let you go, just the relationship between Soramitsu and Sora. You did talk a little bit about this, that the Sora network is decentralized network. You have Polkaswap, which is a DApp, a DEX built on top of the Sora network. That also is a decentralized DEX. So what is that relationship between Soramitsu, which is your company, which I believe has about 100 employees, is a centralized company, does a lot of the development work, obviously, for the Sora network, and has done the original creation of it. Can you just talk a little bit about what that relationship is, how that works, having kind of a centralized company, but then also working on these decentralized projects?
Well, yeah, so Soramitsu is a for-profit company, completely centralized. Sora, despite maybe naming similarities, is a very separate ecosystem and project, and then Polkaswap is just a DApp on top of Sora, out of other dApps too that people are creating as well. So Soramitsu, plans to contribute in the future to the ecosystem through the RFP process. Anyone can respond to an RFP with a proposal, and I'm sure we'll be making our own proposals because it's a good source of revenue, I think, for the company, and it's also good for the ecosystem because we're around 100 people. We have really good engineers and good engineering prowess and experience, and I think we can create high quality solutions and code going into the future as well. But by no means would it be good to exclude other companies or teams who want to come forward and who are also doing high quality solutions. So I would be thrilled personally if large companies like, I don't know, I'll just say like Google, Microsoft, Oracle, if these types of engineering companies with lots of good engineers came forward and built new solutions, I think that's a huge win for everyone. I don't really expect big companies to do as much as kind of smaller firms, but because of the RFP process and the way it works, it's possible for companies to get some reasonable compensation to do development work. And I think that should incentivize lots of people to contribute.
Well, I have to let you go. That's our time with you. So I feel like we just scratched the surface. There's just so much to talk about with Sora, everything that you're building, Polkaswap. We didn't even get to Fearless Wallet yet, which is another amazing project that you kind of created, or that Sora has created, which is a separate mobile wallet for Polkadot and Kusama. It's one that I use. It's my favorite wallet in that ecosystem so far. So Great. Congratulations on that as well. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing to have you on the channel because we're huge fans of what you're doing. We love Polkaswap already, and we know that it's just the kind of the very beginning of it. So thank you for your time. It's been great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and great questions, and I hope people find it useful.
All right, CryptoWisers, that was our CryptoWise Chats with Makoto Takemiya, CEO of Soramitsu. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, again, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. All right, guys, stay tuned. We're going to be back with some more CryptoWise Chats, but we will also be back with our regular deep dives into altcoins our altcoin videos, going to be throwing in some live videos. So lots coming up on CryptoWise, so stay tuned for that. As always, thanks for watching. This is Milton saying over and out.